There's a variety of response to arguments, or rather to arguers, that I've observed in some capacity or another in just about any comment thread where someone is disagreed with. As you can imagine, this happens often in the real world, but it happens even more observably on the internet. I see large groups of otherwise seemingly rational people doing this, and I even see that some people doing it while pointing out the irrationality of others in the same breath. This technique, if you will, boils down to being a subtle type of strawman and ad hominem combined that people don't seem very self-aware of, or they just feel highly justified in committing. A straw man is a logical fallacy wherein you represent, or you misrepresent rather, your opponent's argument or position with a more easily defeated one, then argue against that. Kind of like how it's easier to beat up a man of straw than an actual person, unless, of course, the actual person is someone like Rush Limbaugh. I'm willing to bet that his degree of physical fitness is about on par with the strength of his arguments. But I digress. An ad hominem is when you attack the person instead of the person's arguments, kind of like what I just did to Limbaugh. Aha! That was an example, not a digression. Stand your toes, people. So, what's this straw man ad hominem funky combination I see or hear so frequently that it drives me just a little bit more insane every time I experience it? It's when people make assumptions or an assumption about the person they are disagreeing with and are happy to write that person off or those people off based on those assumptions, which come in the form of how the target really is, something that he or she isn't letting us onto or doesn't even know about themselves. It's usually something negative or something that would negate their arguments or make them hypocritical, but determining these things about your opponent puts you in the position of knowing more about that opponent than that opponent does about themselves. Like a mind reader, or at the very least, an armchair psychologist. Let me give you some examples. I've made many videos addressing Charley, the self-proclaimed atheist homophobe who feels that society would be a better, safer place if everyone was as hateful and intolerant toward gay people as he is. Every comment section of each of my videos to him is filled with people declaring that Charley is obviously a self-loathing, closeted homosexual himself. Yeah, that feels good. Wouldn't it be awesome if it were just that easy to dismiss every hateful argument he produced rather than taking the time to carefully deconstruct each part of each one and really get to the root of why he's actually wrong? Sure, it would be easier to sprout wings and fly your commute to work too, but standing in your driveway telling yourself that you can fly, even if you really don't realize it, isn't going to get you there any faster. He's not the only example either. In my video defending female cosplay against a male blogger who had some rather bitter things to say about women who dress up at conventions, there were tons of comments declaring that he was only saying those things because he must be some overweight, middle-aged, sexually rejected, and frustrated loser. In both of these examples, it might be the case that many people who were once highly anti-gay turned out to be closeted homosexuals themselves. You can probably think of several examples. It may be the case that many of the males who have bitter feelings towards female cosplayers, like the one that blogger did, they might be sexually frustrated losers. However, assuming that all people with those symptoms must match those conditions just because some do is a hasty generalization fallacy. So again, it's fallacious reasoning, and it doesn't get to the core of the argument. It's the same fallacy committed by assuming all Catholic priests are child molesters just because many have been convicted of such, arguing with a priest or a member of the church and assuming that, well, he must be like the others without any proof. It's a non-starter, even if it's easier than actual argumentation. People do the same thing with S.E. Cupp by writing her off as, oh, she's not really an atheist because the no true Scotsman fallacy is far easier to lean on than actually breaking down their bullshit piece by piece. But writing her off as something other than what she claims to be is as productive as fringe Republicans accusing Obama as being a Muslim or an atheist or an antichrist, rather than addressing his actual political actions they take issue with. Now, I know it's difficult to argue correctly and to give your opponent the benefit of the doubt, especially when your opponent is venomous, rude, arrogant, and has no interest in extending you the same courtesy. But we as a species have to realize that strawmanning each other and assuming things about each other to write each other off and really avoid having to think about the points we're trying to make to each other only facilitates the frustration of talking past each other. If you enter an argument unwilling to entertain the notion that you may be wrong, or to take your opponent seriously enough to address his or her actual points, then you can't expect your opponent or the fence-sitting listeners to extend that courtesy to you. And if we allow argumentation to devolve to merely two people waiting for their turns to talk to themselves without the essential components of listening to each other and addressing that which is actually said, then we forfeit the colossal advantage that we have as a species, the ability to communicate complex nuances and to receive confirmation of our accuracy or information of our folly from other people, even from other people we thought were dead wrong. No matter how easy it is, no matter how good it feels, I implore you, don't give up that advantage.